Are you in the military with orders to McDill, or are you a veteran looking to settle down in the Tampa Bay area? If so, this is the episode for you. Hey everybody, Melanie Atkinson here, Realtor with Smith & Associates in beautiful Tampa, Florida. And today, you don't just have to watch me. I am joined with my teammate, colleague, realtor, friend, past client, veteran, everything, Nick Clemente. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
You're very welcome. So I wanted to bring Nick here today because I wanted to do a video that was specifically for anyone that was having to come to Tampa because they were getting orders to McDill, or if they were a veteran looking to move to the Tampa Bay area. We have a lot of veterans that settle down here because we have a lot of reasons for them to come here. And Nick, being a veteran and also being a realtor and on my team, I thought he was the perfect one to talk about all of these things.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's get started. So as a introduction, can you run through all of the areas that you've lived in prior to moving to Tampa?
Deep breath before I try to spit them all out. It's been a minute. So we started in Charleston, South Carolina, is where I joined the Army. Then we went to Kentucky, so Fort Knox, Kentucky, near Louisville. Then we moved to Kansas. From Kansas, we went out to Monterey, California for grad school. Then we moved back to Kentucky. Then we moved up near Seattle, Washington. From there, we moved to Germany. And during that whole time, there was a couple trips to Iraq and an Afghanistan trip in there as well. Moved back from Germany to the Washington, D.C. area, then to Omaha, Nebraska, then back to Fort Knox, Kentucky, culminating with our final move right here in Tampa, Florida.
Okay, so basically you have the ability to speak on what it's like to live in other areas around the country and even internationally.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So when we first met in 2019, you were relocating to Tampa. You were still working at McDill. You were still active.
At that time, I was working in Kentucky. I was moving to McDill, so
Right.
I had orders, and I knew that was like Christmas time, and I knew that I was coming in the summer. So it was that period of, I know this is happening, and I got to find a place to live.
Right. And you had said to me during when we were looking for houses that you had always wanted to end up here. So why is it that you wanted to end up in the Tampa Bay area?
So it really starts with my childhood, right? So I grew up in Southern California, warm weather guy, grew up at the beach, grew up surfing. And then from there, I've moved, as you heard my list, a lot of cold places. And I really just don't like the cold. I don't like being places where the air hurts my face. And so it made me question my life choices and, quite honestly, the people who chose to live there for long periods of time. And so I knew, no offense to anyone from Omaha, Nebraska, I love you. But I knew that wasn't going to be it for us. So Tampa really seemed like a great opportunity to have a great assignment at McDill, potentially transition, because I knew I was going to hit my 20 years and could potentially retire if I chose to do that. And then my mother-in-law lives in the Villages. So she's nearby, not getting any younger. And so the idea of having her, an hour and a half away was a benefit.
Yes, shout out to you, Joy.
You are getting younger, Joy. Don't.
So when we were looking for houses, I have to go back quite a long ways because that feels like forever ago when you moved here, but it was only 2019. You were actually one of my very first YouTube clients that found me on YouTube and chose to work with me because of the videos, which fantastic.
Absolutely. I like to say that I overlooked sort of your shoddy production values, and you were sort of just really learning at the time. No, I didn't overlook anything. The videos were fantastic. They were super helpful.
Yes.
And then I was able to reach out and connect with you, and you gave us some great advice and kind of got our search started off right, and then helped set us up with the timeline.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I didn't expect whenever I started the channel was I didn't realize how much military people, when they're moving, have to rely on the information that they find on the internet. So I was getting a lot of leads from people that were relocating to McDill or relocating to Tampa in general that had been in the military because they were used to doing this online research as much as they could. They very much trusted you, very much trusted me to show you around the area and help guide you with, where was going to be the right places for you. So I think that that's a unique thing with our veterans and military people that move to the area. Do you find the same thing?
No, absolutely. And so
the dog is licking my foot.
That's why I wear shoes. So when you get orders, right? Let's take a break.
Oh wait, buddy, you gotta
Come
sit
on.
down. I'm sorry.
You did a really good job of keeping it together.
Well, that's because he literally does it all day long. So
grass out of there, and
I noticed he was
Yeah.
looking at your feet, and I'm like, how is she keeping it together?
because he licks
Like,
my feet all the time.
how is
So
she
at this
keeping
point, I'm
a
just
train
used
of
to it.
thought.
I know, right? I strung together a lot of sentences there.
Um,
Okay, so we were talking about. So the question that I said was, military people have to do a lot of research.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So absolutely, when you get orders, you typically, if you're lucky, get about 6 months warning. Oftentimes, it's a much shorter amount of warning. And so people either you might have the opportunity to go there once and check it out, maybe not at all. And so what people really have to rely on the internet. And so they rely on Facebook groups. Spouses groups can be a huge and important resource where people talk about schools and commutes and things like that. But things like your videos added another dimension to really get a sense for what was going on down here. So they were invaluable to us, and I know from experience that they've been invaluable to a lot of clients.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that. That was not something that I knew was going to happen, but it's been such a great reward. Okay, so when you were moving here, like we said before, you were still active and working at McDill. So you
Correct.
chose to live in the Westchase area
That's
of
right.
Tampa. Why did you choose Westchase? And talk a little bit about the commute time too.
Sure. So we chose Westchase, and I go back to my childhood in Southern California. So I was very, very fortunate. I grew up in South Orange County in a little place called Laguna Niguel. If you've ever watched The OC or that show Laguna Beach back in the day, you'll know that it was just a beautiful place to grow up. Very well manicured, sort of very well put together. There was just a beautiful,
Lots of drama there too.
a beautiful aesthetic and a lot of drama, But where Westchase really appealed is it had that very similar aesthetic. Everything was just really well put together, really well manicured, and it just was just a lovely suburb. And it was also kind of a prototypical Florida suburb.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to get the single family homes, you were going to get the pool, either on a pond or on a conservation lot type of thing. Good schools, that was critical because our son was going to do the last 2 years of high school at that time. So really at that point it was overall lifestyle, the aesthetic, the school district. Those were the things that were drawing us to the Westchase area.
Yeah, and then we talked a lot about the commute. So when you were working at McDill, what was your commute like there?
Yeah, so that was the rough part. I would go into work really early in the morning, so I would typically leave about 5:30, and so that was easy, 35 minutes.
Right.
Because you're the only one on the road at that point, no traffic. Coming home though, if you're fighting against traditional sort of 4:30, 5:30, 6 o'clock traffic, it could be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour on any given day.
Right.
So it was kind of fighting your way home was a bit of a grind. And so the commute was a little bit much.
Yeah, and one of the things that I talk a lot with the people that are working in McDill is at the bottom of our South Tampa Peninsula. So it's not really easy to access from anywhere other than South Tampa. So if you're looking for a certain price point, you tend to have to be out in the suburbs. So most people are aware that they're going to have a fairly long commute, especially if they're going normal rush hour hours, the 7 to 9, which I know a lot of military folks don't do that. So that's helpful if you don't have to do that. But I did do a episode on commute time specifically from McDill to all of the different suburbs. And we'll link that in there because that's a really, really helpful episode that we did for anybody that has to commute to McDill.
The other thing to remember when you're talking about the peninsula is if you live on the west side of Hillsborough County or Tampa.
Sorry, he's like knocking over the thing.
That he was like humping my chair for a second there.
The Tampa sign was moving. Okay,
Okay.
so start over with if you live on the west side.
One thing to just remember about where McDill is located, like you said, on the bottom of that peninsula, is if you live on the west side of Tampa, Hillsborough County, you have to kind of fight there's no rapid routes up that peninsula. It's
Right.
all surface streets.
Right.
And so during rush hour, you're just fighting through lights and stop signs and whatnot until you can get up to Kennedy and the Veterans, and then you have more main arteries. If you're on the east side, where a lot of people gravitate towards Fishhawk and Riverview and those areas, then you do have the Selman Expressway, which is nice because it basically takes up about half of that peninsula
Right.
with a high-speed, avenue, right?
Right.
So you've also, sometimes time and distance don't correlate
Right.
exactly the same way. But yeah, one of the trade-offs of living on the west side, which we love, was just fighting your way up the peninsula. It'd take a good 30 minutes even just to get to Kennedy,
Yeah, and
which is that sort of north-south, boundary there
Right,
on the
and
peninsula.
we'll talk about the Crosstown Selman Expressway. It kind of goes by two different names here. It is one of the easiest roads to navigate in all of Tampa, and it really does create a nice connection between the southeast suburbs, Brandon, Riverview, Lithia, which is where Fishhawk is. We have Apollo Beach down there. You have Valrico, you have Sefner. All of these places have access to the crosstown, and it is a toll road. But what's nice about it is it has flyover lanes. So in the morning, they're going to the, I guess, southwest towards the downtown area, and in the evening, they go back towards the suburbs. So you not only have the regular roads, but you also have this extra couple of lanes that changes direction depending on time of day. So for people that are commuting to McDill, that is a help, although it is distance-wise pretty far. And then once you get to the surface streets in those suburbs, it can get really congested. So kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but
so having worked down in McDill for 3 years with people who lived all over,
right.
The short answer is, if you don't live in South Tampa, there's no easy commute.
Right.
You're looking at 45 minutes. You just kind of put 45 minutes in as a basic assumption. It could be more depending on the day.
Yeah.
But you've got to account for that unless you're living in South Tampa.
Yes.
And then of course there's a trade-off where you're going to then probably have to live in a smaller place with fewer amenities, and it's going to be more expensive because of just the high demand.
Yeah.
So people have to make that trade-off, and one of the aspects that you kind of have to suck up is the commute.
Right. Exactly. Perfect. Okay, so let's talk about, you have since retired.
I am retired.
You are a full-time real estate agent now with me. It's been a really fantastic transition. You jumped in head first a while back, and you've been successful so far in doing it. And mostly, a lot of that comes from the fact that you have moved around a lot. You have had to purchase a lot of homes. You are a very organized person, so that makes working with clients really nice and easy. A little bit different than working with me. Much more logistical.
We balance each other out.
We do, yes. So now that you have retired and you are considered a veteran, talk about what it's like to be a veteran in Tampa, pros, cons, all of that.
Being a veteran in Tampa is fantastic, and it's partly due to the fact that there are so many veterans in Tampa. I don't have the exact statistics, so anyone can fact check me, Google me, but Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, the greater Tampa Bay area, I believe has one of the largest veteran populations per capita of any major metropolitan area in the United States. That's mostly has to do with McDill, so there's people like me who they transition out of McDill, and B, the sort of natural attraction of warm weather, low income tax or no state income tax, good quality of life, and all of the infrastructure to support veterans. So all those things sort of bring veterans here, and then even more infrastructure is built up around that to support them.
All right, let's talk about the infrastructure that is the support for veterans, medical support, things like that.
Medical is your biggest one. If you're retired, you can continue to access TRICARE, which is great. So the main thing is McDill. You can still utilize the pharmacy, and your prescriptions are free if you're on TRICARE. So if you want to drive down there, that's great. It's a cost savings. So that's sort of the hub. And then you've got the Veterans Administration. So you've got the VA, and there's two major veterans sort of VA hospitals, one in Hillsborough County and one in Pinellas County, that serves those two population centers. And then along with the major hospitals, there are actual medical centers. So they're distributed throughout the two counties as well. So for example, because I'm over on the west side, I'm assigned to Bay Pines, which is the big hospital in the southern part of Pinellas. But I go to the North Clearwater Clinic, which is about 20 minutes from my house. It's brand new, fantastic facilities. So for your regular stuff, I don't have to go all the way into a big hospital. And that's really the same kind of throughout the two county area. So it's a pretty good place to be a veteran. There's a lot of support, and there's a lot of veterans organizations. Between the VFW, American Legion, I'm a part of the Military Officers Association of America here in the Tampa chapter. There's just a ton of organizations if you want to retain that connection to the military. There's just no end. There's just no shortage, will be the better way to say, no shortage of opportunities.
Yeah, we've talked about the camaraderie and things like that come from living in an area where you have people that have lived that life.
Yeah, and it's funny, you almost have a shorthand. When you realize that someone else has served, and not even, I'm Army, you might be a Marine or Air Force, but immediately you switch into a shorthand. It's comfortable. You have similar experiences. You have shared values, shared hardships, And it's amazing how quickly you can form bond with
Yeah,
folks.
you guys have like your own language. Whenever I talk to military people,
Roger that.
I understood that one.
Yeah, okay.
But no, there are a lot of abbreviations and things like
a lot
that.
A lot of acronyms.
And yeah, so people, when I talk to them, sometimes I don't know what they're talking about. So it's really helpful that you do understand that language. Okay, so you and I talk all the time about how Tampa has changed in just the 4 years that you have lived here. And I've been here for, I don't even remember how long, since 99, so 25 years. So in just the 4 years you've been here, Tampa has exploded. And so talk about what it's like from your perspective, having moved here in 2019.
So the downtown area was had always been known as sleepy, and that was kind of the vibe that I got as I was researching. But downtown Tampa has absolutely changed its whole vibe, right? From a place where people just go to work and then you roll up the sidewalks at the end of the day, to a place where people go to eat and drink and have a great time. Obviously, you've got Amalie Arena. The Bolts are fantastic. The Bucks have obviously been really, really good since we moved here. So sports have been a huge infusion of energy.
It really was.
You know, there was a period when we were winning everything.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it seemed to coincide with COVID, but it didn't really stop us, right? So that energy, the St. Pete Pier opened, which was just an amazing addition to downtown St. Pete's. That's just another vibrant community. Just feels like there is just, again, no shortage of things to do, places to eat, stuff to see, sports to cheer for. It's just, there's a lot going on, and it's attracting a lot of people.
It is, yes. With that population growth, it allows restaurants and entertainment venues to have the courage to open because they have the population to support them, and hopefully they'll be successful. And it has really been just so eye-opening. Water Street, I was there yesterday. Water Street is like a whole new city within our city.
Absolutely.
That wasn't there in 2019. So it really has been an amazing stretch of growth, and there really doesn't seem to be an end to it either. So I feel like if you got here prior to 2020, you got here just in time to witness this massive amount of growth that's gone on.
We came on the leading edge of it, but we definitely witnessed it. And to your point about Water Street and between Tampa and St. Pete, it also feels like where Tampa might have been more of an afterthought among your sort of luxury buyers or the wealthier people out there who might gravitate to Miami or some of the other big places. It feels like over the last 4 or 5 years that the real luxury market has really exploded here as well.
Yeah, and that's not, that's I don't know how much, many people are looking for luxury condos, but our high-end condo market was essentially like zero, 10 years back. And now all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of projects and a lot of business or buildings that have opened in the last couple of years, which really has brought more of that luxury buyer here. It is funny because people from California never called or anything before 2020, and then all of a sudden it was like the West Coast realized that we were
West Coast
here.
Discovered us.
Yeah, the West Coast discovered us. The people that might have gone from the Northeast down to Miami came here. It's definitely more affordable over here in the Tampa area, and I think when people come here, they realize how nice everybody is and how nice the area is. So it's like a secret that's been figured out from the rest of the country. And we got joined by Tucker.
We did. No, Tucker's very attentive.
He was not having it being down there on the floor.
I did want to say, because of course I'm mentioning the luxury. It's something that's changed. If you're a military buyer or a veteran and you're thinking to yourself, why are they talking about luxury high-rise condominiums? True, not in the market for those either, right? Those are a fairly niche market. However, they bring with them in the bottoms of these buildings really cool bars, really cool restaurants. On the tops of some of these buildings, really cool rooftop bars. So even if you're not in the market for a $2 million condo, which that's fine, most people aren't, there's still a lot of things that come with it that the average person can really can still utilize and benefit from. So it's just a nice overall improvement.
Right. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what you do like about Tampa. What are the things that you don't like?
It's the flip side of the kind of growth coin, which is it's just crowded. It's gotten more and more crowded. As I said, I grew up in Southern California. Part of the problem there was it was very crowded, and it's only got more crowded. So traffic has definitely gotten worse. Sort of our roads, our schools, just not, the basic infrastructure wasn't built to accommodate this many people.
Right.
For instance, a good friend of both of ours moved down here in the 80s, and he told me just the other day that when he first moved down here, 275, which was a 6-lane highway, rush hour was when there was 5 cars on the road.
Yeah.
And he was saying, I can't believe they built such a huge road. And I was laughing because I'm like, every day I drive on it, I bitch about why is this road so tiny?
Yes.
Right? So I'm complaining about how small the road is. And it's just that 35 years of growth has, and that this last 5 have been even more significant. But
yeah,
crowds are a big one. And then the weather. It's a double-sided, coin as well, which is to say during the wintertime, it's wonderful that, we're not dealing with sub-zero temperatures. We're not dealing with the -30 wind chills in Omaha like we had in the past and like they were just dealing with this last weekend.
Yes, this weekend, yeah.
But in the summertime, I'm not gonna lie to you, if you've never been here, it's really hot, it's really humid, and it rains most afternoons. The thunderstorms roll through, and you will get acclimated, but it's something that takes some getting used to.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a lot about all the fun things there are to do here, but if we're being completely honest, Nick is not necessarily one that wants to do all of those things. You have lots of friends and are married to somebody who does all of those things, so we keep them in the loop.
I like to hear about it,
but you don't necessarily want to do
or see it on people's socials.
So, and I'm bringing that up not to call him out as lame and boring on the YouTube channel.
It feels like you just did.
I'm bringing it up because I want people to understand that even though there are a lot of like really neat things and a lot of growth going on here in Tampa, it's not necessarily, you don't have to do that. And so for people that would rather stay in, what is it, what do you like to do?
So again, as someone who does not identify as fun, it's true. I'm a little more of a homebody, right? And that's why I love our neighborhood, walking the dogs, out amongst nature. I like typically staying close to home, whether go for a run, go to the gym, read a book in the backyard by the pool. That's sort of my idea of relaxing. Now, it's great to we were at a Bolts game Saturday. It's great to be able to get downtown and get to a Bolts game and enjoy that. My wife will go to every game. I'm good like once every 2 weeks. So everyone's got
2 weeks.
A month. Everyone's got their own tolerance, right?
Right.
And the great thing about Tampa is it can kind of, you can expand into whatever your interests are.
Right.
If you're like me and you want to kind of just be more suburban, you can do that. If you're like my wife and you want to get out more and experience everything, you can do that too.
Yeah, you live in a really wonderful neighborhood in the Westchase area that has great sidewalks, it's beautiful nature, it's a mature neighborhood. So it is one that you can be outside and just, use your day to relax or work or sit by the pool. Pool was a must for you, and you got a really beautiful backyard. So 2019, prices were different.
2019, you could do a whole lot more in 2019 than you could do now. That's for sure.
All right, so we are going to do a lightning round.
Ooh, I love it.
So whenever people are moving to Tampa, they're always asking about, certain things about living in Florida that I always think are funny because, I've lived here forever, so I don't necessarily think they're a big deal. But I wanted to ask you, being a newer resident of Tampa, how big of a deal these particular things are. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to name things. Tell me how big of a deal it is, okay?
Is 1 not a big deal and 10 is a horrible deal?
So, yeah.
Or something to be very concerned about?
So, okay, so we'll go from not be important at all at 1.
Okay, to 10
to being
is very,
really
very important.
Yes,
okay.
That makes sense in,
yes.
In scale form.
Scale,
right?
I just want to make sure I understand the scale.
Okay, hurricanes.
6.
Okay, so that's like right in the middle. Because we don't have to think about them all the time. It's like, they're coming.
The news will go crazy and everyone gets upset and scared and hoards toilet paper. But at the end of the day, if you prepare and you just kind of keep your head about you, it's really not.
Right.
And if it's gonna be bad, it'll happen. There's not much you can do about it. Right. So probably not worth stressing too much about it.
We do have plenty of time to prepare.
Just prepare. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really the answer.
Right. Sinkholes.
2.
Yeah. People ask us about sinkholes way more than we actually have to deal with the reality of them. So yeah.
Yeah, they do happen, but it's not like houses are falling into the earth everywhere you turn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
2.
I think they have bad PR.
I think sinkholes need a new firm. Their PR firm is horrible.
Okay, insurance costs.
10.
Yes.
And the insurance companies also need a better PR firm, but that's a different story. No, insurance costs. Ultimately, the insurance market here in Florida, I don't want to use the word broken, but it is very challenged.
Broken.
It is very, very challenged.
Yeah.
And we're seeing very, very consistent and steep price increases
Mm-hmm.
that I worry will potentially price out a lot of people. And I also worry about whether or not, if a really bad hurricane or other disaster or multiple disasters come, whether or not our insurance market will actually be financially and fiscally healthy enough to cover everyone.
Yeah.
So you could have paid a lot of money and then wind up realizing that your coverage didn't turn out to be what it was cracked up to be. So the insurance market in Florida definitely needs some attention
Yes.
from our elected leaders, and we need to get, that's a big one. It needs to get fixed.
I agree. It's a 10 in my book too. Property taxes.
That's I'll call it a 7. And really the property tax rates here in Florida aren't bad compared to all the other places I've lived. The real issue is, like we talked about, the difference between 2019 and 2024. We've just seen very significant appreciation, right? And so that does affect the assessed value of your home and ultimately your tax rate. Now, the good thing though that we discovered when we moved here is if it's your primary residence, you've got the homestead exemption. So if you apply for that and you live in the house, then you're capped at no more than 3% a year assessed value increase.
Right.
So that was awesome because we were very, very fortunate. I like to say we won the calendar lottery. We just dumb luck bought our house in 2019, and it's probably appreciated $250,000 in that time, but our taxes have only gone up incrementally. So that's
Yes.
protected us. So that's why I don't give it a 10. It can be challenging for investors. It can be challenging for people
For
on
newer
fixed
residents,
incomes or
yeah.
newer residents now that prices
Yeah.
are high. But
I think property taxes they get a really bad, people talk about them as if they're really bad, but exactly what you just said is it's not, property taxes are not bad for everyone.
No.
They're bad, or they have been bad for the people that have moved here. And what we see are really significant variations between neighbors that have lived there for 20 years and neighbors that just moved. You can have a property tax rate that's essentially double when it's the same exact house. So I think people talk about that all the time, and not the fact that it is essentially a fixed cost for those of us who have lived here and have it homesteaded, because we know that it can only go up a certain amount each year. So it's a problem for some, but not for everybody.
yeah, it's not a universal problem.
Yeah, it's not a
Absolutely.
universal problem. Like insurance is definitely more of a universal
That's an everybody problem. Absolutely.
Right. So we talked a little bit about this overcrowding.
I'll give that a 7. It's an irritant. I think we're gonna have to do some planning as a metropolitan area. And I think the other thing is if we all just give each other a little grace and all just treat each other with dignity and respect on the roads, and it's not that bad to be, when we're all bumped up against each other, but it is crowded.
Well, speaking of roads, driving.
I still stand by DC drivers being the worst, but Florida drivers, and I know everyone likes to say, well, no one's from here. So the bad drivers in Florida have been imported from everywhere else. And I can see that, but there is a lot of, the drivers here are pretty challenging. So
Yes.
you just gotta keep your head on a swivel when you're out there and,
Yes.
and drive defensively.
Yes, defensive driving. I have a lot to say about that, but we won't talk about that.
And it also goes back to insurance, because car insurance in Florida is significantly more expensive
Right.
than anywhere else. And there's multiple reasons for that, but
Yes.
crazy drivers and underinsured drivers or uninsured drivers are a part of it.
Right. Okay, bugs.
3. Because bugs don't like me. If my wife was getting interviewed, she would say 9 because she gets chewed up to get the mail. She's actually behind the camera. She's saying 10.
Yeah, she's saying 10.
She's actually putting on bug spray right now.
Inside bug
She has
spray.
to douse herself in bug spray most days.
Okay, how about alligators?
2. It's a live and let live situation.
A live and let live
You
situation.
just leave them alone and they won't bother you. Mind your
know.
kids, mind your pets, keep them away from the water. But alligators are fun.
I know. I love them, but people think that's weird too.
They're fun to look at. I
They're
mean,
super fun to look at. I mean, if you don't bother them,
and
then
during
don't
mating
cut them, or
season,
don't feed them.
well, don't feed them. But during mating season, when the big ones walk down the sidewalk, it's alarming, but also kind of cool.
Well, alligators migrate, so people don't really realize that they migrate. And when they migrate, they have to walk from one pond to the next. They can't swim; they're not attached. So, yeah, people think that that's strange, but that is kind of a normal thing here in Florida. Okay, cost of living.
That's an 8. Cost of living, and it goes back to the appreciation, the taxes, and the insurance that we talked about. And additionally, a lot of people don't know this, but during sort of our period of hyperinflation, where we in Tampa actually saw more inflation than other parts of the country. So when the other parts of the country were at 8.5%, we were at 9. So Tampa cost of living has become a lot more challenging than when we moved here in 2019, where things were really quite affordable. And now I would say that while it's not nearly as expensive as LA or New York or San Francisco, it's certainly not sort of the affordable oasis it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think that's a hard reality for a lot of people. I always tell people that Tampa is not on sale anymore. You're definitely paying for the year-round lifestyle, and it is more of a market that you're paying a premium for. And hopefully everyone gets a lot out of living here, and that premium is well worth it, which is what we've seen over the last couple of years. Okay.
And in fairness to Tampa, everywhere else is more
Everywhere
expensive
else
too.
has gotten more expensive.
Everywhere else, nowhere got less expensive. So
Yes,
everywhere,
very true.
so sort of on balance, I still think Tampa's worth the investment.
Very true. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. So Nick, any last words for your fellow military people out there that might be thinking about moving to Tampa?
So if you're thinking about moving to Tampa, if you've got orders to Tampa, if you're thinking about retiring or you've separated and you want to come down here, all that sort of community, I would say take a good hard look at it. Of all of the places where you can relocate or all the places where you can serve, Tampa has been the best one that we've had in a 20-year career. We chose to live here. We chose to stay here. And there's a ton of support, great community, lots to do, great sports teams. Compared to most military communities that are kind of out in the boondocks, or at least Army communities, Tampa is just an absolute breath of fresh air. I encourage you to, give us a call if you have any questions, and we'll help you figure out if it's the right place for you.
Yeah, so the other member, or another one of our members, Dale Rivers, is also an Army veteran. So he can speak to all the same things. So between him and Nick, if you guys have any needs, please register on our website or give us a call, and we're happy to help you navigate the Tampa area. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.